Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle. I am your host, Will McFadden, and I am very pleased to welcome back Tori McElhaney. We're going to talk about Atlanta's thrilling, decisive 38-20 victory. But Tori, I know, is a little bit of a bittersweet day for you.
Yeah, this is my first day back in the office. I worked at the game this weekend, so that was technically my first day back to work. But my mama unfortunately passed away last week, and so I spent all last week with my family and being around them. And I appreciate all the people who reached out with thoughts and prayers and just love in general on Twitter, social media. I got a lot of love in a time where I think I very much needed it. And so it was tough. It's going to be tough, but you know, it's always great to have friends and families and loved ones, and as well as the Falcons community who have been so great to me, be around. So for that, I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you everybody for letting me have the time and the space to take some time to be with family. But I am very, very happy to be back. This is where I want to be. This is where my mama would want me to be. So I am very excited to talk about this game.
Of course. But yeah, no, it warmed my heart to see kind of all the well wishes on Twitter. Yeah. I know that's not important, spending time with the family and everything is, but you are loved. We're excited to have you back. But let's talk about a really cool win.
Yeah.
So the Falcons are now 4-2 on the year, but more importantly, they are 3-0 in the division, and they are 4-0 in the NFC, which is awesome. Like, I mean, I think when the schedule came out and everybody was looking at the first little bit, like if you had teleported me back in time to tell myself, hey, like, here's how it's all going to go down, I would have been like, cool.
Yeah.
Let's take that. Like, you're not going to win them all, right?
Yeah.
But these are the ones that matter. And going into this game, I think given kind of the one-score close nature of the Falcons' first 3 wins, really the first 5 games, period, this was an opportunity, I think, to make a statement against a team that was not of the same caliber as those other teams. So in your opinion, did they make a statement yesterday, and what statement did they make, if so?
I think so in the second half. I think that first half was a little touch and go. The game started, especially offensively, where I felt like the pass game was a little bit out of rhythm. They're struggling at times to connect, and then you started to see them get their feet under them a little bit. And I do mean that like as much as literally as I do figuratively, because what we're going to talk about a lot is the run game and how the Falcons were able to rely on Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and this offensive line to put the game away, to go along with a couple key interceptions from AJ Terrell and Clark Phillips. And so to me, it was, you get into the second half, and that's where I felt like the statement was made. It was like you knew you were going to commit to run the ball, and you did it. And both Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson averaged over 5 yards per carry in a game. And that in and of itself, when you're talking about them having over 95 rushing yards apiece, like that matters, and it mattered a whole lot in the second half, especially of this game against the Panthers. And this was a game, to your point, that the Falcons not only needed to win, but it needed to win, I think, by multiple scores, which it did do. That was very important. You talk a lot about needing a decisive win where you're not having to rely on the last 2 minutes of the game and kind of sitting on the edge of your seat and on pins and needles or whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
That when you got to the second half and the Falcons found that separation that they haven't had to this point in the season, I was kind of sitting there almost like, wait, where's the suspense? Like, it's
such a shame Taryn's not here to take her victory lap. This is all she's wanted all year long.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Taryn writes the game breakdown that runs at the buzzer, at the very, very end of the game. So she's working on that during the game's entirety. She's
the world's most stressed out person watching a Falcons game, which is saying something.
Which is saying a lot, because I know a lot of y'all are very stressed, but Taryn is probably the most stressed. Yeah. And she wasn't stressed last night, which was nice.
Sunday
I'm
was a lovely reprieve from the stress. But yeah, you're right about the run game. And honestly, yesterday's performance is a little bit of a throwback, but it reminded me of Reggie Bush and Lendell White with USC, because the thunder and lightning thing gets thrown around a lot for good reason, archetypal and all of that. But both guys just were so in their own element and successful at what they were trying to do. And I think the Falcons have done a really good job, honestly, all season, but especially yesterday, of riding the hot hand. You know, when Tyler Algier came in and they kind of moved the ball down into the red zone and eventually scored, like, I had no issue at all with them just leaving Tyler Algier in there, even though, you know, Bijan is ostensibly one of your top playmakers. So is Tyler Algier. And it was really cool to see that. But I also love that you brought up the offensive line because, like, this is back-to-back weeks, and the way that we're talking about the offense kind of finding different elements of itself. Like, imagine what it must be like for an offensive lineman to 1 week throw the ball 59 times or however many times they did, and then the next week run the ball for nearly 200 yards.
And it would have been 200 yards if you don't count Kirk kneeling the ball at the end of the game.
Which I don't.
I
frankly.
don't either.
I'm kind of like, that was a 200-yard day. Let's go.
I legitimately, it was like 205 is what they would have had without the kneel downs at the end of half and then end of game.
You know, like the weird quirk where if you miss a field goal, the ball's like spotted where you attempt to kick, and it's like, let's do another weird rule and just kneel downs shouldn't count in the box score as part of like rushing yards.
I agree.
Like, who decided that?
I'm going to say that because it was funny because I was in the locker room post game and I was talking to Matthew Bergeron. He was like, we had 200 yards rushing. It was like a thing. It was like, they took it away from us, but we had it.
Yep.
But no, to your point about the offensive line, I know you talked to Jake Matthews a little bit. I talked to Matthew Bergeron, and to your point of, this is a Falcons team in the last 2 weeks has shown that it can win in different styles, in two very different styles. And I think that does matter in terms of like the psyche and the confidence of...
Good teams find multiple ways to win games.
Right. And I was also talking to Charlie Warner, and he made this one comment that I felt like was really indicative of where the Falcons are. And he said something along the lines of, we're winning while we're figuring this out.
Yeah.
And that's and he was talking about it in the context of winning in different ways and winning with 509 passing yards from Kirk Cousins against the Bucs, but then turning around and rushing for 200 yards against the Panthers. Like, that in and of itself, he's like, we're still trying to figure it out. I think he's like, we're still trying to figure out how Zach Robinson wants us to operate. He's still figuring out how we want to operate and when to kind of ebb and flow between those two things. And
it's cool if you can like work on the car as it's still on the highway and rolling at a high speed.
Right, exactly. You would, I think you would rather be winning and going over kind of the mistakes and the miscues every single time than losing and having to go over the mistakes and miscues.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Jake Matthews touched on another element of that, which is specifically in game. You know, and I know every team, right, is adjusting to what their opponent is doing. And I mean, we all talk about like halftime adjustments as though there's some big grandiose thing, which like I kind of feel like they're not, just because we're not privy to them. We all like assume that there's some mystical art of like the halftime speech, but really Jake kind of said, hey, it's just communication on the sideline. It is communication at halftime of, here's what we're seeing. You know, the coaches have one vantage point, whether you're in the box or whether you're down there on the sideline. The players are the ones in there. They're the ones that understand exactly what we're doing, what I'm seeing, and their ability to relay that to the coaching staff and their teammates allows them to make some of these in-game strategy adjustments to really pinpoint a deficiency of a given team on any Sunday.
Right. Well, it's interesting, too, because Kirk Cousins told this story after the game, which I thought was really funny. But he said, he was like, Zach Robinson, you know, came up to me at halftime, and, you know, it was a normal conversation that I feel like all offensive coordinators and quarterbacks
The good ones, too.
The good ones. They should be having them. But just kind of the offensive coordinator, in this case, Zach Robinson, asking, hey, what do you like?
Yeah.
You're the one that's out there executing the game plan.
Like a pitcher and a catcher.
Yeah. What's working for you? What's not working for you? Tell me what you like, what you don't like. And Kirk said, I like running the football.
My arm's tired, dude. We threw for 500 yards on Thursday. Can I just hand it off for once?
Exactly. Like, let Tyler and Bijan do the work in the offensive line. It's fine.
My back hurts.
Right? Yeah. But it is true because, and I even asked the question in the press conference, like, what at that time made you feel like you could say that to Zach about like, hey, like, let's go to the run, and Zach being kind of like, okay, let's do it. It's working. And he said, he was like, when you're not running the ball as much, but you're getting 4, 5, 6 yards a pop, like, you take notice of that. You really do. And that was so true because I was going back and I was looking on the flight home at just like the playlist, and it was funny because in their very first, the very first play was a 6-yard run from Bijan. And I think going into this game, you knew that the Carolina Panthers run defense was not that great.
Frankly, there weren't a ton of elements of their defense that were that great.
Right.
But yes.
But run defense
in particular,
I think you knew that could be something you could exploit if you're
Absolutely.
this offense
Yep.
for the Falcons. And so they pop off with a 6-yard run from Bijan right off the bat, and then they throw the ball for the next 5 plays.
And that's kind of when they felt disjointed to you, right?
Exactly. That was the exact moment where we're in probably the second drive, and I'm like, this pass game is kind of
missed. It felt like guys were open, but he wasn't looking in their direction.
I know.
Yeah,
I think I even said one time, I was like, he needs to pull off of his first read or something like that to Will. But then you look at the net. So all of that's happening, and it feels a little, to your point, disjointed as a pass game, and it's not really working how they want it to. And then they go to running the ball again in that second drive, the one that it was their first touchdown. And literally 5 yards, 7 yards, 9 yards, 9 yards, 1 yard, 5-yard touchdown.
It's pretty good.
That's the breakdown in running the ball in that second drive for the Falcons. And it was in that moment that I think things clicked. And I know we'll probably talk about the drive that I'm calling the drive that the Falcons haven't had this year.
Okay.
In the fourth quarter, where they pick up 15 yards from Bijan, 20 yards from Tyler Algier, and they score to take the game to 35-20.
Yeah, it's the put your foot on their throat drive.
Yes,
yeah.
That's something that they haven't had, I think, to this point in the season. It's the one drive that I felt like they were missing, where it's literally like a demoralizing, we're running the ball and we're going to bleed the clock and we're going to score and we're going to extend our lead. Yeah,
they've been like Rocky Balboa in the first couple of movies, where it's like they're so good at taking that punch and then not going down and staying in the fight and answering back. And this was like Rocky 4, where it's like he sees Drago bleed, and then it's like, boom, boom, boom. He's just going after him. Like, I'm just not going to let up at all, and I'm putting you away. And that's what that felt like. And so you're totally right. It was cool to see. Again, we're just learning new things about this team. We're finding different gears. We're finding different dimensions. And think back to what Raheem said after the Tampa Bay game, where it was like, they're almost daring us to pass. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
We're just going to pass. We're going to do that. Thank you. If Moneyball, Brad Pitt, if they're going to give it to you, say thank you. Take it. Go ahead. Yesterday, what were we doing? Running the ball really effectively. Let's just keep on running the ball until they prove they can slow us down. And yesterday was actually the second time in team history that 2 running backs in the same game surpassed 95 yards. The other time that they did that was in 1972, and it was Dave Hampton and Art Malone.
Wow.
What a name, Art Malone.
Great.
I just love that.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it was one of those things where you knew it was good. Like, you knew the run game was working, and you could feel it. And it was funny. I think Tyler Algier in the post game, and I love interviews with Tyler because they're so funny, but he was like, yeah, I mean, we were just hitting them. It was like, yeah, you kind of were, until you got to the point where you're like, all right, we feel good about this.
Yep.
And it's funny. The juxtaposition of Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson is just hilarious. I love getting to know both of them.
So we saw, an offense that was pretty juxtaposed over the last 2 games. Which version do you prefer? Which I think I know which one is kind of, actually, no. I am not going to say that one is more fun than the other, because I had a lot of fun watching the run game work yesterday just as much as I did Thursday watching the pass game. So what do you like more?
I actually think that we have different answers here.
Yeah.
Do you like the pass? You like the pass game?
I'll say that I'm like kind of more of that new age geek. Who's like, throw the ball. It's more efficient.
Yeah. And I love when you can air it out and go 50 yards down the field. That's great. But for me, and I don't know if this is because my dad was like a defensive coordinator, and like
Stop the run.
Yeah, I oftentimes feel like I gravitate towards the physicality of the game, and the best way you see the phicality of the game is in the run game, whether it's run defense or in your rushing attack.
Yeah. Oklahoma drill Tori.
Yeah, no, we joke, but I love it. And I do think that there's something to be said about going back to the other point that we were making about like enacting your will on somebody. And when you are mano a mano and your offensive line is just creating space.
How many times did you say to me, like, wow, that was a big hole?
I know, so many times. And Will was like, great analysis, Tori. And I was like, thank you. I'll be here all day. It's fine. But no, I do. I love, and I also think my dad's a defensive coordinator, so I love the physicality of the game. And I also went to the University of Georgia during the years of Todd Gurley, Sony Michel, and Nick Chubb. And there was something about like when those guys would get going, you would feel you feel the momentum of a run game. You feel the momentum of a pass game too, but I don't know. I like games like that where it's enacting a certain amount of will to the game itself. No,
I mean there is something to that, right? Because in a pass game, sometimes there's a lucky break, somebody you don't see, somebody makes a great, there's like more factors involved. When you're just running the ball, it's just like, stop this.
Yeah.
Here I come.
Yeah.
Guess what? Like, you better be ready.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you can do that, there's a primal nature to it of just like, wow, we are physically imposing and dominating and just on a roll. So
it was funny too, because I think this was Josh Kendall from The Athletic who tweeted this out. And I remember I made the same note in my notebook about like, it was the first time that Tyler Algier came into the game, and Charlie Warner, who I'm doing my entire notebook on Charlie Warner.
He was incredible.
He was so good. Him and Chris Lindstrom, I'm just like, I love watching them block.
Yeah.
I know it's a weird thing, but I just do. I love it.
Yeah, the Falcons had 142 yards on runs outside of the tackles.
Right.
And Chris, like, I know he's a guard, but he has a lot to do with that because of some of these stretch zones.
Yes.
And Charlie and it was such a all hands on deck type of day for the run game.
A lot of times, if you're running outside the tackles, you'll see they will send Chris Lindstrom to the next level, and he's picking up the linebackers.
'Cause he's so good in space.
Right.
Yep.
So he still is a big part of it. But anywho, I love watching that. And there was a point, and Josh Kendall tweeted it out, and I thought it was so freaking funny, where he goes, Tyler Algier and Charlie Warner are checking into the game for the first time. I bet the Falcons are going to run their third, or they're going to run the ball for the third time. Like, that's what they're about to do.
Yeah.
And it was so true, because, and to your point, it's like, if we're sitting up in the press box and we are also having that same exact thought when we see Charlie Warner and Tyler Algier check into the game for the first time, and we're like, they're about to run the ball, and then they picked up 7 yards on that play. And it's like, if we are sitting in the press box and we know that, Carolina sure as heck knew that too.
Yeah, it's like how Newt Rockne used to like publish the plays in the newspaper the like week before he would play an opponent, because it was like, hey, here, go ahead and know what we're going to run. Right. You still can't stop us.
Which there's something to be said about that, like in terms of a confidence builder, and also I think in terms of like just like gritty, like a grittiness.
No, it is confidence, right? And that's what Raheem brings. You know, when you watch him in some of these post-game locker room celebrations, the dude is like, who is next? Let's keep it rolling. And I really feel like if this team already is hot, right? They've won 3 in a row, but this will be a dangerous team if they are really riding that momentum. And so I guess we can kind of close the offensive part of this conversation here. Like, do you think that like these last 2 weeks we're going to look back on as kind of like, okay, wow, that was the stretch where the offense really got going? Or do you think they've figured out a formula here where going into pretty much every matchup the rest of the season, we as Falcons fans, as people who cover this team, should have a level of confidence that we're going to see elevated offensive play from the Falcons here on out?
I do. I think these last 2 weeks, you've scored, 72 points in the last points, in the last 2 weeks, and that's not something that 74. Yeah, there you go. Math. It's hard. I'm tired. I'm sleepy. But I do think that 74 points in 2 games is not necessarily something that we've had the chance to see from this organization in a minute. And I do think that if we know, we've said this, we know, and we'll get into the defense, but we know what this defense is. We know it's a bend but don't break type of defense. And that means that teams are going to score, and they're going to have their moments, and they're going to have their yards, and they're going to have time of possession. But if you have an offense that is able to put up points and get in the end zone over and over and over again, and also do their part, especially against the Panthers where they were bleeding the clock and time of possession was very, very even. I think the Falcons had it for 30 minutes. And
it was like 30-29.
Right,
really
it was
close.
very, very close. So when you have an offense that is able to do that, that matters. And I think moving forward, I do think you can kind of look at the last 2 games, whether they were winning by the pass or winning by the run, to kind of, to Raheem's point, to a lot of guys' points, like whatever the defense is going to give us, we're going to take.
Yeah.
And
they're building their menu of options.
Right. And they're, to Charlie Warner's point in the locker room, again, it's like Zach Robinson's still figuring it out, how to use these offensive weapons. Yeah. And I think that we have seen in the last 2 weeks different things click at different times. And I think that only bodes confidence, and I think it only bodes well for where this offense could go. I mean, it was even Patrick Mahomes said it when the Falcons played the Chiefs a few weeks ago. Like, this is a team that's only going to get better the more
their
time. Their
opponents have said that a lot this season, which is kind of eye-opening, honestly, when you see the guys who are out there on the field. And we're saying all of this 6 games into this working relationship between everybody. So you're right. Like, think about 6 weeks into a new job.
Yeah.
And then think about 3 months into a new job. That's night and day. And then think about a year into a new job. Like, they will get better as the chemistry develops. As, you know, we saw, I think, Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Majan and Tyler Algier all have big games on the same day for what feels like kind of the first time. And the hope is that that's going to be the identity of this offense, because that's kind of what it should be, along with a kick butt offensive line. and that's just really exciting, because it does feel, like you said, a little bit of a throwback to 2016, 17, 18, like that era of explosive, dynamic Falcons football. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's. And so it's really great to see. But let's switch over and talk about the defense a little bit. Kind of a tale of two halves, a favorite of Dan Quinn phrase. But the defense I saw was catching some flack on social media kind of in the first half, where it was like, oh, okay, so this is the defense performance we're getting today. And then they only allow 3 points in the entire second half. And I think when we talk about some of the adjustments and the offense really doing that defensively, like, could you sense that there were adjustments made, or was it just kind of a better play? I know the interceptions certainly help, right? Like, those are impact plays, and they generated some pressure, but still didn't have a sack. So we're going to have another week of like that conversation. Yeah. But what did you see from the defense kind of first half to second half? I
think it was probably more execution than it was. I don't think they necessarily changed anything. Like, it's funny that you brought up, halftime adjustments in, like, at the beginning of this podcast, because I used to be a firm believer in halftime adjustments are a thing, and I don't know if I believe that anymore. I do think it's just like a conversation to where it's not like, oh, someone comes in and just like shows all these guys like, hey, this is going to work. Like, we're going to do this moving forward. After a whole week of game planning, it would be weird if, like, throw it out the window, like a climactic movie moment where it's like, we got the one thing that's going to work. And then it doesn't work. I don't think it works like that. And I do think that there's something to be said about, like, okay, like they maybe do some different stuff, and you kind of in the back of your head, like, okay, let's not make the same mistake twice. Right. That to me is more indicative of what the Falcons' first half versus second half defense was. It's like they just didn't make as many mistakes. There weren't as many, I think, missed tackles. Like, Chuba Hubbard, like, he had a good game. He had a good game, and you knew he was going to have a good game. He's coming off of 3 games in a row of averaging 105 very close to 100 yards. It was like over 100, over 197. So I think that you knew what that was going to be, especially knowing kind of the Falcons' deficiencies in run defense that they've talked about over the last week. But I saw a note from Next Gen Stats where it was most of his success came from up the middle. Actually, I think on the season, the Falcons have like the 5th best yards, like, above expectation. Meaning that they're holding running backs below the expected yardage gained on a normal play in a given situation. They're holding them like 30 yards below expectation on runs outside of the tackles. Up the middle, I think they're like 4th or 5th worst in that. So you're seeing where it's kind of up the spine of the defense.
on the perimeter, they're doing a good job. And I wonder, is that like kind of a 3-4 thing where you've got kind of more of a horizontal positioning as opposed to 3 guys right there on the second level?
Yeah, I do. And I also think that you have to think about what's been going on with the inside linebackers and how much movement there's been, because Nate Landman was hurt. Then Troy Anderson was hurt.
He looked like he was having fun, though, coming back yesterday.
Nate Landman, I think something that was lost in the sauce a little bit was the fact that Nate Landman had 2 forced fumbles that just like ended up rolling out of bounds or whatever. But you forget that that's something that he does. Like he's a very ferocious type of tackler, and you could just watching him play, you could tell that was somebody who he was just like itching to get back out there. And I think, because to your point about the middle of the defense, I think because of they haven't really been able to get into a good rhythm, a good flow at middle linebacker because of the injuries. And I do think that matters. And I will be curious to see what happens when Troy Anderson gets back and you go back to what we were talking about all through training camp. It's like you have a good problem where you have starting caliber with wherever you need it, from Troy Anderson, Caden Ellis, and Nate Landman. But I do think that kind of plays into it a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I will be curious to see when, if Troy Anderson can go back sooner rather than later. He's missed the last couple of games. But yeah, what that looks like, because when we talk about options offensively and being able to do different things, like that's what I think really gives this defense the versatility, is that linebacker position and the trio there that allows you to kind of do a few different elements on your defense. So the cornerback position, though, A.J. Terrell got his first interception since, the 2021 season? I like the last game,
week
second
17.
to last game. Yeah. And Clark Phillips gets the first one of his career. Honestly, again, like the way that we don't want to factor in the kneel downs is like rushing yards. I want to just go ahead and give Clark Phillips, our camp champ, by the way, a pick 6, because
he would have had it.
He did. I mean, he went down. He did the honorable thing, the sportsmanlike thing, and he secured the Falcons a victory. He allowed the offense to go kneel it out, but that was so cool to see both of those guys. AJ's in a real pivotal moment that I think allowed the Falcons to really continue to put the game away. And then Clark sealing the game on a last gasp drive. I mean, do you think, to this point, 6 games in, like it feels like the secondary is really the strength of this defense? Everybody except D. Alford and Mike Hughes has an interception, who's kind of in the real mix there. Like, is this one of the best Falcons secondaries that you've seen in your time covering the team?
Yes. I do. And I think that, I know people are going to pick apart their performance in that 2-minute drive at the end of half, but like, I think that was more of an anomaly than it was the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. I think more times than not, this secondary has performed.
And it started with the Chuba Hubbard big run, right? That drive did, which, I mean, the Panthers may have been willing to like, hey, we'll take this in halftime. And then a big run opens it up and they keep rolling.
Right. And I do think, and I know you said, like, Mike Hughes, D. Alford, they don't have interceptions yet. But boy, is Mike Hughes one of my favorite players to watch right now. I think that he has played very, very well over the course of these first 6 games. I was like, he's the best open field tackler on this team. I was like, and I will say that with my whole chest. Like, he is somebody who has made so many plays, and he's so fun to watch. And he has, for all of the things that we have talked about the cornerback position, what's so interesting is like, even though Mike Hughes is playing really, really well, the Falcons are still giving Clark Phillips a lot of reps. He was in on a few of those big drives at the end of the game, particularly. I mean, I know we're talking about his interception at the end of the game, but he was in there a few times. And so I find that very interesting. You have someone like Mike Hughes who's playing very well, but then the coaches are like, but we also know that we need to get Clark Phillips in there. We need to get him some live game reps. And they're not afraid to make that transition and move those guys in and out, which I think a lot of coaches sometimes may be afraid to do that. But I think that speaks to Jerry Gray, and I think his mentality of like, he's been in that position. He's a DB.
Yeah.
Like, he knows kind of how much it matters that these guys are in the flow of the game.
You need those reps. You need to see it against live action. Yeah.
Especially outside corners,
Yes.
because you're on an island so much
Yep.
that if you have only like 3 or 4 chances in a game to make a play and you don't, I think a lot of times that can get into the psyche of a corner. And I think just being able to accumulate those reps, it matters so much. I think that A.J. Terrell wouldn't have had the second or third year that he did if Dan Quinn wouldn't have
just
thrown him out there.
All rookie season. Yeah.
Like,
you're out there.
And you just take your losses when they come.
Hey, go cover Mike Thomas. Hey, go cover Mike Evans.
And cover Julio Jones every single day in practice and get punched in the mouth a few times and then learn from it and move forward. And I think that matters for someone like Clark Phillips. But it's also funny because, like, Mike Hughes is playing so well.
Well, literally in this game was a learn from it and move on moment for Clark Phillips,
the
right?
Touchdown.
He gave up the touchdown to Xavier Legette, a little bit of a size mismatch there. But then, to kind of bounce back in the same game. And that's why these reps are important, right? It's kind of similar to, I think, a basketball player if you don't touch the ball at all, and then it's like, all right, now break down this dude off the dribble. Like ISO with 30 seconds left in the game. It's kind of like, hey, man, I haven't been in the flow. I haven't gotten all that action, and now you're asking me in a tough spot to do that. Like, we're not all Malcolm Butler coming off the sideline to get a pick six in the Super Bowl.
Speak for yourself, man. I feel like I could do it. No, I'm kidding.
You probably could. I have no doubt about that. You're sneaky sometimes. I want to real quick ask you just about the pass rush and the pressure. I wrote down a few different kind of ideas for maybe how the team could get their production up. So I'm just going to, for the sake of time, kind of ask you which of these three, and the three I wrote are more blitzes, but they're already blitzing at a very high rate. So I don't know if that's kind of the answer. Take more chances allowing deep passes to prevent some of these quick completions, right? So you force the quarterback to hold onto the ball a little bit more and pat the ball. Right now, because of the emphasis of not allowing stuff deep, I think they're able to hit these checkdowns a little bit quickly. So maybe you mix up that balance or bring in outside help at the trade deadline. You know, I'm saying this without a full understanding right now of the Falcons cap situation. I will look into that, but the cap, you can make things work if you really need to.
Right.
So which of those three do you like as a solution?
So the more blitzes, again, to your point, they're doing that. And, you know, it's causing havoc, but it's not bringing down the quarterback.
Yeah, they're getting pressure.
They're getting pressure. Right. And I am of the firm belief that, like, just because you're not having sacks, but you have pressure, like, I'm okay with that.
But they still have a pretty low pressure rate.
Have a pretty low pressure rate. So, the taking more chances, allowing deep passes to prevent quick completions, maybe.
Yeah, but that's kind of going away from who you are, right? Yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily, I mean, and then bringing in outside help at trade deadline, also maybe.
Sounds like Tori's just wants to stand pat.
I don't know. That's the thing is, like, I don't know what's going to change this pass rush. I don't know what you can do, because I feel like we've seen them try a bunch of different things. And I don't want to say no avail, but there hasn't been the sack
results
numbers.
Are what they are.
They are what they are. And the pass rush hasn't been productive in 2024.
Yeah.
And you were considering the fact that you went out and got Matthew Judon and you get Grady Jarrett back to full health and you draft Rukaroro. Like, I think that there was this thought that maybe it would click. And maybe we had expectations that were too high because of the moves that were made in the offseason. And maybe that's on me for kind of expecting, like, oh, this pass rush is going to get after it and they're going to be night and day what they were. But maybe that's not fair to assume that. But also at the exact same time, you do go out and get Matthew Judon. And so you just kind of have this, like, wait a minute, like, shouldn't he have a sack or two a game? And
I talked to him last night after the game. I mean, you could kind of sense his frustration. He's like, yeah, we're getting close, but we got to get him on the ground.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that I said about, like, I think I said it about Arnold Ebiketie at one point, where I said he's this
so close. Yeah, all the time.
He's this close from making the play. And I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what to do to fix it. It's why I'm not paid what these coaches are. If I knew, sure as heck, I would be out there waving the flag, telling them exactly what to do. But I don't know.
I wish you were. I wish you were out there waving that flag. But I do think there's a different way that we can, like, how often during the off season and draft season, frankly, do we talk about like the front four, front seven are tied to the secondary, and the secondary, back end and front end are linked together. So I think it may be unfair to talk about and praise the secondary and the performance and the good job they're kind of doing, while not at least giving the defensive front some credit for that. Some of these pressures, the throw that AJ picks off, like, there was some pressure there.
Yeah.
So it is impacting, but you're right. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Like, it's clear that this is, as we look probably at the whole team, still the biggest issue facing the Falcons, and they're working on getting it corrected, but it's going to be another week of questions and everything like that. So let's go ahead and wrap up today's show with game balls. We are 3-0 since you told me game balls after a loss don't matter. So I just said, hey, let's simply stop losing.
Right.
I put in that request, and I'm very pleased to see it's been honored.
Congratulations.
So who gets your game ball for yesterday?
So, I mean, I think I can't give it to just Tyler Algier or just Bijan Robinson or just the offensive line or just Charlie Warner. I would like to give it to them collectively. Like, it's like on Mean Girls where she breaks apart the crown and like throws it to everybody and it's like, you get a piece of the crown. Like, or I'm like, Oprah, you get a car, you get a car. I'm just giving out game balls to the entire, if you played a part in the run game on Sunday night, you get a little piece of the pigskin.
I love that.
That's what I'm giving.
I toyed with giving it to AJ, but I think I'm going to give it to Zach Robinson.
Good
because
one.
I just think the last, think back
I didn't know we could give them to coaches.
Oh, everything's on the table. You can give it to me one time. I'll give it to you.
Oh, thanks.
Everybody's here.
Yeah, okay.
Just work hard. But but I just think back to kind of that week one and how coming out of that, everybody was like, what is up with this offense? It's so predictable. They only did this on 98% of their snap. Like, there's so many signs. And then to, again, be kind of like fooling some of these, I think, Panthers side, but like Saints, Bucks, moving the ball on the Chiefs at times, like the Eagles, that final, these are good teams. And I really do think that in his first season as a full-time play caller, the chemistry, the read that he's got on his guys, the ability to kind of go with that hot hand, to talk to Kirk, say, like, build that relationship, that trust, to sustain multiple pass catchers in an offense. Like, I'm really impressed with just the output that this Falcons offense has been hitting. And so I do give Zach a lot of credit for that.
I think so too. And I think that's something that, I can't remember who said this. I think it was Bijan, was like, Zach is really good about talking to the guys, to the point of what we were talking about at halftime when he's asking Kirk, like, hey, what do you like? Like, I think he's very understanding of, hey, I'm not going to do something and I'm not going to put you in a position that, like, you really don't like or don't think is going to work.
Like, you're the one that has to do it, so what do you want to do?
Right. I know we throw around the word collaborative and it becomes this cliche, but this offense does feel like, especially right now when they're trying to learn each other and they're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what clicks, what doesn't click, those conversations and the fact that Bijan Robinson said, he cares about listening to us and our opinions and kind of putting that into the game plan to because we're comfortable doing it. I think that goes a long way, and I think it behooves Zach Robinson also looking forward as his own career continues. You know, he's 6 games in.
Right, you're getting buy-in from the team, though, and that's where I think when we look at the culture of the whole building and the inclusivity and just like everybody is free to be themselves, to have a voice. It is a collaborative, effort, to your point, even though that is a little bit of a cliche.
Right.
But yeah.
And I hate it. I hate that it's a cliche because it matters.
It is really cool. And I think actually there's one example of, again, like where there is still room yet to grow for this offense. And it was Kirk not missing, he hit him, but Darnell Mooney down the left sideline on a play that should have been a touchdown. And again, it looked like a little bit of a miscommunication between quarterback and receiver where Kirk kind of pinned it on him.
Yeah.
And I think if you just like put a little more touch on the ball and let him run under it, that's an easy touchdown.
Yep.
So again, Monday morning when they're looking over that game film, there's a learning point and there's a teaching point for Zach Robinson. And so, maybe there's even better days to come for this offense, as crazy as it feels right now. But that will do it for our recap of this game. Sorry it's a day late. Traveling with the team, doesn't always allow for everything. So we hope that you guys still are enjoying this Victory Monday, basking in the glow of a 3-0 division stretch, sitting here at 4-2. Man, it feels so good at this point, but there's still a long way to go. And that starts on Sunday as the Falcons will welcome in the Seattle Seahawks to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Kickoff is at 1 p.m. We will be back on Friday with our preview show for that matchup. But until then, for Tori McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. We'll see you then.